Yeah, now I think I should be audible. Perfect. And I'm just fixing my green screen as well. 16 of you have already joined. We are learning, guys. We are learning. I'm sorry about this. Okay, now I think I'm going to wing this. Can you guys see my you cannot see the presentation. You guys cannot see the presentation. What is wrong? Is it fine now? Yes, I think this is fine now. How are you doing? There are 24 of you. Thank you so much for joining. I genuinely apologize. My OBS also seems to be lacking today. We have a special occasion, as I said. We were setting up the stream, and Shivesh says forgiven. I might be stuck a few times. Let me try to remove a few things that are unnecessary from here so that there is no issue, because we are lagging a lot, it seems. Just give me a moment, guys. Give me just a moment. I was about to mess everything up. Yeah, Huda, I know video is lagging a bit. I know. Okay, just a second. Things are almost fixed. Is it still lagging? Is it lagging still? I have also opened the. Ishita says it's like I'm back in COVID where I saw my parents struggling. Well, that's that is very saying. That is very telling, Ishita, because we are going to have someone who might struggle with all this system. So I've just started, and right now it's fine. It's fine. So what we have done in this particular lecture, what we have thought of doing in this particular lecture is that we went through the questions of December 2026, paper 1, 2025, going back in time, paper 1, and we saw a few patterns. We saw recurring topics, we saw important topics, and based on that I have prepared a lecture on Indian logic. Indian logic. Sorry about my handwriting. And we will be dealing with all the important issues, all the important topics, and we'll be looking at several things: Indian philosophy in general, and what are the different schools, and then we will come to Nyaya philosophy, and we will talk about uh, the the pramanas, the pratyaksh praman, the anuman praman, and whatnot. And then we will solve questions as well, right? As you can see at the end of this, I have also listed a few questions, or like a lot of questions which came in the exam. So this could be a long session. Be ready for it. I hope it works out. If it's lagging and all, we will try to fix it to the best of our capabilities. But here is the interesting part. We have a special guest today, and I am not going to teach all of this. The special guest is going to teach all of you. So, are you ready? Can you guess who he is? He's actually somebody who is very knowledgeable. He's actually somebody who has seen, practiced Indian philosophy. In fact, you could call him a sage. And that is who we are welcoming today. His name is Shivesh, you are going to not like this. His name is Maharshi Odyssey. The man has time traveled. The man has time traveled. He used to live in the BCs, and Shivesh is going to teach it. No, no way, not Shivesh. The man has time traveled from the BCs, and he's slightly jet lagged because he has traveled so much. So I want all of you to send him a pranam, send him a namaste, and I want all of you to respect him, talk to him respectfully, and without further ado, I am going to invoke him. Okay? Give me a moment. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready? All right. 3, 2, 1. Shit. He's coming, guys. He's coming. Just a second. Oh, this is just me. He's taking some time. He's taking some time. Arif, don't worry. You will be able to focus. He's taking some time. Hello, dear children. I am Maharshi Odyssey. You must be wondering that my beard looks like a Maharshi, but my hat, it looks like Dumbledore. Because that is all these Odyssey people could give me. I'm slightly bald. And I needed something to hide my baldness. And that is all these guys could give me. That is all Dhananjay could give me. I'm not happy with him. But he told me that Maharshi, you are the knower of everything. You are the Prameya. You are the Pramata. You have the real Brahma. You know everything. And I want you to impart unto our students the knowledge of ancient Indian wisdom. And that is what I am here for. Do not die, my child Huda. You are not going to die, but you are going to learn a lot. You are going to realize that death is nothing but a new beginning. Somebody is calling me Maharshi Odysseus door. Now, had I lived 3000 years ago, which I do live, I'm slightly jet lagged. It was a long journey to 2026. I would have not known this reference. I would have not known who Dumbledore is. But I used my power. I used my yogaja to learn the English language, to know all the movies. And I realized that you guys love watching Harry Potter. Hello, Arund Utpal. I might not be able to pronounce your name, but I know a lot about you. Again, through Yogaj. I know things, I know Brahm, and all of that I'm going to tell you today. But why are you wearing a sorting hat? I told everyone, please go back to the video and you will know. Fatima. But without further ado, we have to understand that I am here to teach you a few things. Few things about Indian philosophy. And that is what I'll do in this lecture. I want all of you to focus. Not on my beard, not on my face, and also not on my hat, but what I'm going to teach all of you. All these rishis that I will talk about are my dear friends. And through personal experience, I will teach you about them. I will teach you about the Vedas. I will teach you about Shrutis. I will teach you about Smritis. I will teach you about different philosophies and what do they have in common. By the end of this lecture, you will have two things. Number one, you will be enlightened. But number two, you will be well equipped to get your JRF. The former one might not be that important to you right now, but it will be important later. The latter one, which is cracking JRF, I know is extremely important to you. So that is what we are going to aim. Swami looks like Dhananjay. Do not compare me to that human. I am not human. I am above human. I have transcended humanity. But I'm here in the human form to teach all of you. So focus. Focus on what I have to say. When we talk about Indian philosophy, we call it Indian Darshana. Please focus, everyone. Shivesh, I know you are part of the literary odyssey. But through my powers, I can make you invisible from literary odyssey. I can make Dhananjay do things that you would not like. So please, stay in your limits. लगता है यूपीटीजीटी का पेपर अटेम्प्ट कर लिया. I will ignore that comment because I have realized through my powers that it is a controversial topic. Let me start with Darshana. When we talk about Indian Darshana can be divided into two parts. The first part is Shruti. I want all of you to focus now. This is important. It is Shruti and Smriti. These are not names of your friends, children. These are not names of your friends. These are the very foundations of Indian philosophy. Can somebody tell me the difference between Shruti and Smriti? I have realized that this modern world would not wait. This live chat is too delayed. I can also form poetry as I go, so I will have to do it myself. Shruti literally means what is heard. Shruti literally means the truth. Truth that comes from the divine. It is not human authored. Not human authored, and that is why it is called apurusheya. Apurusheya. Smriti is remembering. Very good, Arif, my child. Shruti is the oral teachings and Smriti is the remembered teachings. Very close. Smriti is remembered. Shruti can be attributed to sages like me. One of the very famous Smriti and very controversial in your times, these times, is Manusmriti. A lot of you don't like Manusmriti. And to each their opinions, Manu is a good friend. And I think he is a good person. That is all I have to say. Shivesh, I can give my opinions on Manusmriti, but you have to realize that I am on your channel. And do you want me to give my opinions on Manusmriti? I think not. So child, stay a bit wise or learn some wisdom from me. Now moving on, this is the difference between Shruti and Smriti. All the Vedas are Aparusheya. They are heard from the divine. They are heard from the divine by sages like me when they contemplate in their meditation. And then they impart that knowledge for the whole world. So all the Vedas are Shrutis. All the Upanishads which talk about truth, metaphysics, transcendence, Brahma, Nirvana, they are Shruti. On the other hand, Itihasas. Now when I say Itihasas, do not confuse it with history. These are epics, but they are called Itihasas. For example, Ramayana. For example, Mahabharata. They are Smritis. Puranas are Smritis. Puranas are big encyclopedic texts that have a lot of things ranging from mythology to genealogy of deities to folk traditions and to a lot of other things. So they are also part of this. Then there is Dharma Shastra, for example, Manusmriti. All of these are basically interpretations of the Shruti. They try to make the Shruti reach common people through their interpretation of what the Shrutis have to say. My question to you, children, would be, is Natya Shastra, which is often called the fifth Veda, is it a Shruti or is it a Smriti? Let me know the answer while I move forward. I'll be waiting for your answer. Let's now talk about the Vedas. The Vedas are the rock bed of Indian philosophy. You cannot go away from the Vedas. You are either agreeing with the Vedas or you are disagreeing with the Vedas. Just like that guy Plato in the Western philosophy. Vedas, as we all know, are four. The Rig Veda, the Sam Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. Now, Rig Veda is the largest one and the earliest one. When we talk about Rig Veda, everybody is calling Natya Shastra as a Shruti. That is very interesting. But as I said, firstly, it is a Shastra. Secondly, it is authored by someone. It is authored by Bharat Muni. So can you really call it Shruti? That's a question I pose to you. But there is a contradiction here as well, which might support your point, my children. Even though Bharata is credited with the Natya Shastra, in the first chapter of Natya Shastra, it is clearly mentioned that this knowledge has come to Bharata from Brahma himself, from the Lord, from the creator Pritamaha, Brahma himself. So it is in some sense coming from the divine. Then would you call it Shruti or would you call it Smriti? Now Rig Veda. With my mental powers, I can think that this has been a PYQ. Rig Veda is divided into what we call as mandalas or books, and it is divided into 10 mandalas. And then within these 10 mandalas, there are 1028 suktas, which can be also called as hymns. Do you understand? These hymns have richas, Vedic richa. This was a PYQ, and that is why I am telling you this. RF, my child, you will be enlightened. But more importantly, you have to crack your JRF. So focus on that. Then there is Samved. Samved is credited with the origins of the Indian classical music. I can sing a song to you because I know everything, but that will not be the best use of our time. I can show you a raga, but that will not be the best use of our time. So we will move on. Then there is Yajurveda, which talks about sacrifices, which talks about yajna and how do you perform those yajna. And then finally there is Samved. And Samved focuses on practical, day-to-day life. It includes practices. These practices are occult sometimes. These are healing practices. These are social customs. All these things are mentioned in the Samveda as well. Now, what is important here is that every Veda has these 4 layers of themes, so to speak. The first part of a Veda is called the Samhitas. Samhitas are the core collection of hymns and mantras. For example, the Rig Veda Samhita. Rig Veda has its own Samhita, and so does Samved, and so does Yajurveda, and so does Atharvaveda. Or did I write Samveda again? I am sorry about this. This is Yajurveda. And this has the incantations, the healing practices that I was talking about. Should Dhananjay try Osho's manner of speaking? I do not imitate anyone, my child. I am Osho. I am Dhananjay. I am you. I am everything. So please don't degrade me by saying that I should impersonate someone. We start with the Samhitas. It has hymns and it has mantras. The Rig Veda Samhita, for example, has hymns for gods, for deities, such as Indra, such as Varun, such as Vayu. A lot of these gods were nature gods, were gods that found their divinity in nature. Then we have Brahmanas or Brahman. Brahmanas are the manuals on how do you perform these mantras. How are you going to perform them, and what is the hidden meaning of these rituals? And then we move on to Aranyak. Aranya, children, simply means a forest. And there are several Aranyakas which are very famous. For example, Brihad Aranyak. For example, Atare Aranyak. For example, Taitare Aranyak. These Aranyakas is a bridge between rituals and metaphysical contemplation. They talk about rituals, but at the same time they talk about the symbolic, spiritual, transcendental significance of these rituals. And finally, we have the Upanishads. Are you all surprised? You thought Upanishad was something different from the Vedas? No, children. Upanishad is actually a part of the Vedas. Upanishad literally means sitting near a guru, and they are generally framed as a conversation between the guru and the shishya, the student. This is an Upanishad, for example, where I am teaching all of you. These Upanishads are deep Vedic contemplations on the nature of reality, or on what is God, on the ultimate reality, on the self, Atma, Brahm. All these things are discussed in Upanishads. At the same time, do not make the mistake of thinking of these 4 layers of each Veda, 4 parts of each Veda, as a sequential thing. It is not like if you buy a book of Rigved, you will find 4 different sections of Samhita, Brahman, and Aranyak and Upanishad. You will find them somewhere and here and there, but these are layers of discourse in those Vedas. Now, quickly moving forward, let's move on to the schools of Indian philosophy, because we have to move to Nyaya philosophy and the logic. That will be our primary concern in this lecture. So when we think about schools of Indian philosophy, we primarily divide them into 2 parts. The first is the Astic school, and the second is the Nastic school. Can you children define Astic and Nastic for me? Yes, Huda, Upanishads are the closing part of Vedas. Somebody is laughing at the fact that I do not know. I'm slightly tired. Somebody is laughing at the fact that I do not know how to use the eraser. My child, you are not focusing on what I know, but what I do not know. I already knew that you are going to write this message. So tell me what I know and what I don't know. Orthodox and unorthodox. What does that mean, my child? Astic are the believer of Vedas, very good, and Nastics are against the Vedas. There is a better way to frame it. You don't have to say that they are believers or disbelievers. You can say it, but a better way to frame it would be Astics accept Vedas as the Shabd, Praman, or verbal testimony. And Nastics do not accept Vedas as the Shabd Praman. I am very pleased with Anjali's message where she called me a religion. Thank you so much, Anjali. You are my true disciple. Now, Astic schools are generally six. These are Sankhya, Yog, Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Mimamsa, which is often also called Uttar Mimamsa, and finally Purv Mimamsa, which is called Purv Mimamsa, and finally Uttar Mimamsa. Well, I will use the eraser now. Uttar Mimamsa, or also known as Vedant. Vedant has several sections such as Advait Vedant, such as Dvait Vedant, such as Dvait Advait Vedant, such as Vishisht Advait Vedant. But we need not go into that much detail. We are mostly concerned with the Nyaya school, and we will discuss that in a bit. You all said that Astik is somebody who believes or who accepts the authority of the Vedas, and Nastik is somebody who doesn't. Then who is the one who does not believe in God? Because a lot of people in your generation think Astik is somebody who does not believe, Astik is somebody who believes in the authority, in God. What would we call someone who does not believe in God if we do not call them Nastik? And what would we call somebody who believes in God if we do not call them Astik? Meanwhile, there are three major schools in Gnostic philosophy. We have the Jains, we have the Buddhists, we have the Charvakas. Somebody who does not believe in God, or a school that does not believe in God, is called Nirishwarvadi. I see that you children cannot see this. You do not have that perception that I have. So there is a school of Indian philosophy, an Astic school of Indian philosophy, which does not accept or which does not need God, which is Nirishwarvadi. Can you tell me which school is it? One of the Astic schools is also Nirishwarvadi, which does not need the necessity of God, of a creator. I will answer for you. The answer is Sankhya. Sankhya is Nirishwarvadi. Tattvamasi Nityapriya says, and she says, Advait Vedanta is Nirishwarvadi. Well, the conception of God may be different. When you say Tattvamasi, what does Tat mean? What does that mean? When you say that thou art, I am that. What is that? Is it not a godlike thing? Is it not like a primary substance which creates this illusion of the world? So can you call Vedant or Advait Vedant Nirishwarvadi? Think about it. Now, another thing that we need to note here is that Sankhya and Yoga and Nyaya and Vaisheshik, these philosophies go together in some sense. Sankhya and Yoga are similar to each other. The only difference, in fact, between Sankhya and Yoga is that Yoga is Ishwarvadi and Sankhya is Nirishwarvadi. Apart from that, all the metaphysics, all the ontology, all the epistemology is the same. Similarly, Nyaya and Vaisheshik go hand in glove. Nyaya works on the epistemology, on the other hand, Vaisheshik works on the metaphysics. And they both complete each other. What was not worked on in Nyaya philosophy is worked on in Vaisheshik. Similarly, what was not worked on in Vaisheshik was worked on in Nyaya philosophy. Nityapriya says Sankhya indirectly comes to Tattvamasi, that thou art. There is a very famous saying in the Vedas that truth is one and the sages tell it differently. And in that sense, you are right, my child. In fact, the purpose of most of the philosophies, except these guys, is to attain moksha, is to attain that oneness. But how do you do it? What are you conceptualizing as the world? What is your philosophy like? All those make differences. Vedanta or Advait Vedanta is in its core a monoist philosophy. That is why it's called Advait, non-dual. There is no duality. There is no you and me. We all are one. That is what Advait Vedanta says. But Sankhya, on the other hand, is essentially a dualistic philosophy. Its ontology is dualistic. Vedanta says that the world is an illusion. It's like when you see a rope and you think that it's a snake because you are in the prison of Maya, in the prison of avidya, and it's essentially just one Brahma. Sankhya, on the other hand, says that there is Purusha, the utmost consciousness, the pure consciousness, and then there is Prakriti, the world as it is. And both of them are real. Purusha is the experiencer of this Prakriti. So whatever you are seeing around yourself is not mithya. Vedanta says it's mithya. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. But Sankhya does not say it is mithya. It is essentially dualistic, and that is why Sankhya and Vedanta are different. And saying that Sankhya ends up being Vedanta or Advait Vedanta would be, I'm sorry, my child, some sort of simplification. So we cannot do that for now. When we are studying philosophy, we focus on basic details. But more on Vedanta because this is important for your JRF. Vedanta talks about the 5 koshas of your existence. Prakriti is in moving and Purusha is in stillness. That is a very good way to put it, Nityapriya. That is a very good way to put it. Because Prakriti is made of 3 gunas. The Satogun, Rajogun and Tamogun. Sat, Rajas and Tamas. When they are not in equilibrium, that is when the world manifests. But when they are in equilibrium, that is when pralaya happens. That is when there is nothing and stillness. I remember through my powers that there was a net educator who was saying that Sat, Rajas, and Tamas are related to what you eat. Well, that is not true in terms of Sankhya. Everything that there is either Sat, Rajas, or Tamas, or it is made through the combination of these things, these primary gunas. And these primary gunas, sometimes Sat is more, sometimes Rajas is more, sometimes Tamas is more. But we will move on because we have to focus on Vedanta and what comes in your exam. So Vedanta talks about these 5 layers, 5 sheaths, 5 koshas of your body and your existence. When you look at yourself, a materialist would say, I see just a body. A materialist would say, whatever you are thinking is also a product of your body, certain hormones releasing from your body. But that is not what Vedanta says. Vedanta says that this body is the material body and it exists, but there are more dimensions to this body. And those are the different koshas. The first is the Annamaya kosha, which is your food sheath or the physical body. Which needs to feed on plants, which needs to feed on, sadly, animals sometimes, at least in the modern world, which is sustained by food, energy. But then there is the Pranamaya Kosh, the second sheath. This has been a PYQ and that is why I'm teaching this. This is the vital force in your body, the prana, that drives, that is behind all your systems. You can call it the energy sheath. Then there is the Manomaya Kosh, which is the mental sheath. It is your mind, but a lower kind of mind. It is controlled by your sensory perceptions. It is controlled by your emotions. It is controlled by Maya. And that is something that you call as mental sheath. Then fourth, there is Vijnanamaya Kosh, or the wisdom sheath. The way I'm speaking to you right now, my general state of being is the Vijnana Kosh. I am wise. I am above these petty emotions, this Maya, these sensory perceptions. And finally, there is something even higher than this, which is the Anandamaya Kosh. Anand is not something that is related to these worldly pleasure. If you earn money, that is not what Anand is. That might be Sukh. That might be a transient pleasure, sensory pleasure, but that is not Anand as Vedant, Advaita Vedant understands it. Anandmaya Kosh is one when someone realizes the Brahma and is closest to the truth. And this is something which cannot be explained in words. You cannot even explain the sweetness of a rasgulla in words. How do you explain something as supreme as this in your words? And that is what the Anandmaya Kosh is. And that is where you start from. Annamaya Kosh is where you start from. You start from your body, and there are certain basic animalistic needs that you have. For example, food, for example, water, for example, air. And then there is your pranamay kosh, which drives this annamay kosh. And then there is your mind, which has all these emotions. And then there is the wisdom, which is when the mind gets purified. And then finally, there is anandamay kosh. Let's now move on to philosophy. We have talked about Vedanta philosophy, but do we understand what are the different parts of a philosophy? What exactly is philosophy? Can somebody try to define what philosophy is? I will be waiting, children. The sh sound that you hear is trying to silence you from the external distractions so that you can study, children. Can somebody try to define philosophy for me? Philosophy has three parts. Arif says Gyan Dena. Way of life to attain enlightenment. Okay. Would you call Marxism a philosophy? And is it trying to attain enlightenment? The knowledge to understand the I. Well, we are discussing Indian philosophy right now, but I want all of you to also think in broader terms, because philosophy, the word comes from the Greek language. And there are a lot of philosophies which do not necessarily seek I, which do not necessarily turn inwards, which try to define the world, which try to understand the world as it is, the material world. If you think about Charvakas said there is no afterlife, there is no I, there is no God, there is no Atma. Whatever is here. Pitva pitva punha pitva yavat patati bhutale utthaya cha punha pitva punarjanma na vidyate, which basically means that drink as much as you want to drink, and keep drinking until you fall. And when you get up, drink again, because there is no afterlife, because there is no moksha. So this philosophy is not looking at I. Personal ideology that has been through human consciousness. Okay, well, I would define philosophy as trying to understand the world around you, trying to understand the existence around you, at least in this context. And as you are trying to do it, you are also trying to figure out a few things. When you try to understand the existence around you, you try to understand how is my world formed? What are the constituents of my world? And how do I come to know those constituents? What is the right way of knowing those constituents? And once I know what the constituents are, and once I know how to know them, what to do with them? These are the primary questions that philosophy deals with. When I try to understand what are the constituents of this world are, what is the world made up of, it is called metaphysics, which tries to explain the world. So when I was talking about Sankhya philosophy, and when Nitya Priya, my child, was questioning me about it, I said how the Sankhya philosophy has Purusha and it has Prakriti. And within Prakriti, it has the three gunas, Sat, Rajas, and Tamas. It also defines different tanmatras, right? There is the sky, different Mahabhut, Panch Mahabhut it talks about. All these things are trying to explain the world and what it constitutes of. That comes under metaphysics. You can also call it call it ontology. When you try to categorize things, when you try to name them, when you try to form an understanding of it. But then remember what I said. Once you know them, you have to also realize what is the right way of knowing them. That is only when you will be able to know them properly. Otherwise, you might fall into false knowledge, avidya, aprama. And that particular discipline within philosophy is called epistemology or Gyan Mimansa. Do not confuse this with Purva Mimansa and Uttar Mimansa. And once you know how to know, once you know what all there is, you also need to understand what to do with it. What is the primary purpose of why all these things are there? And that is axiology. This includes ethics. This includes beauty. This basically asks the question, what to do? Most of the axiologies or most of the Indian philosophies have the axiology that we have to attain moksha, we have to transcend, we have to be devoid of suffering, we have to be free, liberated. That is usually the axiology. And as I said, there are different metaphysics based on different philosophies. Sankhya and Yoga has one metaphysics. Nyaya Vaisheshik has one metaphysics. Vaisheshiks were very nuanced in this. They divided the whole world into padarthas. There were 6 initially and then there were 7. So there is guna, for example. There is samanya, which is the universal nature of something. For example, when you see Dhananjay, I was not talking about myself, but Dhananjay, that guy, looking at him, you know that he is a human. So that is the universal nature of him. But then there is a particular nature of him as well. He's a fellow who has a YouTube channel. He is a fellow who teaches UGC NET aspirants. So that is his particular nature. So all these things are the padarthas that Vaisheshiks talk about. Vaisheshiks also argue of atomism, that everything can be broken down into small anus or atoms. So that is ontology, that is metaphysics, and we have talked about it. Now we will discuss epistemology. Axiology also, in some sense, we have talked about it, because Sankhya says that Purusha has to be realized. There is Purusha in all of us, that supreme consciousness in all of us, and we have to realize it. Yoga says that that can be done through the Ashtanga Yoga method. That can be done through yoga. Today, you people think yoga is just twisting and turning your limbs and hands and whatnot, but that is just asana, children. And asana is just one part of yoga. Yoga is yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. It's a long process, and asana is just one part of it. And by the end, Purusha is realized in samadhi. So that is again the axiology of yoga. Nyaya says that true knowledge can be achieved through all these epistemological works, and through true knowledge you can reduce suffering and be liberated. Vaisheshiks believe the same. Mimamsa talks about worshipping gods and following dharma, and that is their axiology. And Vedanta talks about again gaining moksha. Jains talk about becoming jina, having the keval jnana. We will talk about it again, a PYQ. Buddhists talk about attaining nirvana, and Charvakas talk about having fun in life. That all is axiology. But what is also important is epistemology, or something that we call as Pramana Shastra. How do you know what is true? How do you arrive at a true conclusion? And that is something that has interested our sages, that had interested philosophers for ages. And even today, we can discuss this, we can debate this. So it would be interesting for us to understand how is epistemology conceptualized in the Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy thinks of epistemology in terms of Pramana Shastra, and it comes up with different ways of attaining truth, or arriving at truth, or realizing what is true. There are majorly 6 types of pramanas that Indian philosophy talks about. Now we have to understand that every philosophy does not follow all these 6 pramanas. Some follow 1, some follow 3, some follow 4, some follow 6 of them. But they pick and choose as to which one they want to. The first is Pratyaksh. Pratyakshe kim pramanam? प्रत्यक्ष को प्रमाण की आवश्यकता क्या है? Whenever you can see something in front of you, whenever you can hear something, you already know that it exists. If you close your eyes and if you can smell a beautiful dish, you would already know that something edible is here. That is praman. And that is pratyaksh praman. It is knowledge gained through direct perception, direct experience of the senses. However, a lot of times you might not be able to see the truth in front of you or hear the truth in front of you. You might have clues based on which you can infer that something exists. The very famous example of fire in the hill. You do not see the fire in the hill. It's too far away from you. You see smoke coming out of the hill. And once you see the smoke coming out of the hill, you say that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. And that is why I can see smoke coming out of the mountain, and that is why mountain also must have fire. I think I am paused, but I am back now. So, Anuman Praman, and that is something which is going to be very important for us in this lecture. We will discuss how the Nayayiks, or the people who followed the Nyaya philosophy, thought about Anuman Praman, and they came up with Panchavyay Anuman, or the 5-membered syllogism. Another way of knowing what is truth, is Upaman. Upaman is when you know something is true through comparison. For example, somebody told you what a nilgai or a blue bull looks like. And they tell you that blue bull looks like a cow, like a domestic cow that you see around all the time. And then you were once passing through a jungle and you saw something which is similar to a cow. And then you come to a conclusion that this must be a nilgai. Because I already know that nilgai looks like a cow. And that is Upaman. Comparison. Or analogy. Now, one very interesting pramana is the Shabd Praman. We discussed Shabd Praman when we were discussing Astik and Nastik schools. Shabd Praman simply means that you accept the verbal testimony of somebody you trust, somebody who you think is authoritative. It could be a book, it could be a human being, it could be a person. That is Shabd Praman, that is verbal testimony for you. And then there is Arthpatti. Arthpatti is an interesting type of Praman. It can be often confused with Anuman Praman, because here also we are kind of inferring in one way or the other. In fact, the Nayayiks, that people who believed in Nyaya philosophy, basically considered Arthapatti as a part of Anuman Praman. They said that the conclusion derived by Arthapatti can be derived by Anuman Praman, so we do not need to accept Arthapatti. And that is why Nyaya philosophy does not accept Arthapatti. It only accepts the first four: Pratyaksh, Anuman, Upaman, and Shabd. Arthapatti basically assumes truth when they see that it is the only explanation of the contradiction that they are seeing. You postulate, you presume, so it's a kind of a presumption. To give you an example, imagine a friend of yours. Whenever you meet them, they are not studying. They are your neighbor, and you never see them studying during the day. They are always playing outside, playing cricket, playing badminton, they are hanging out with their friends and whatnot. But at the same time, when the exam happens, they get JRF. Now, you know that they were not studying during the daytime, but at the same time, they also qualified JRF. So these are two contradicting things. Now, how do you synthesize these two? You say, okay, they were not studying during the day, but they must be studying, and they were studying during the night. Otherwise, they would not have been able to crack the examination. It is impossible. And that presumption, you presume that they were studying during the night. That presumption is exactly Arthapatti. Welcome, Rishita. You are a student of philosophy. I'm happy to know. It's good to see people who are interested in philosophy. And finally, these are the 5 pramanas that I've talked about. The 6th and the final praman is Anupalabdhi. Anupalabdhi simply means that the thing does not exist. It's exactly the opposite of Pratyaksh. I'm seeing this pencil, and that is why this pencil exists. I'm not seeing this pencil in my hand, that is why the pencil does not exist in my hand. It's as simple as that, right? So you can call it non-perception. Now let's look at schools of philosophies, different schools of philosophies, and what were the pramanas that they were accepting. PG, I think I know who you are because I can know a lot of things. Thank you for the super chat, although money does not mean anything to me. I am above all these things, but I will still take your questions. DJ sir, I am not DJ. I am no DJ, my child. You are the greatest for teaching in such articulate manner. शिवेश सर कब पढ़ाएंगे? वो तो शिवेश सर ही बताएंगे. I know when Shivesh will teach because I know everything. But that will be defining the laws of nature if I tell you when Shivesh will teach. But thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it, even though I do not care about money. Now, when we look at different schools of philosophy, let's start with the school of philosophy that only believes in one praman. Can you guess for me which philosophy would believe in only one praman? Huda, I will talk more about Pratyaksh when we will discuss Nyaya philosophy in a bit. So please wait for that. Pratyaksh is simply direct experience. If I see something existing, if I see something through my eyes, through my smell, through my olfactory, through my audible capabilities, through my taste, through my touch, that is Pratyaksh. Nityapriya speculates it could be Nyaya. I will give you another hint, children. It is Pratyaksha. This school of philosophy only accepts the Pratyaksh and nothing else. It says that whatever is here is only the truth. Apart from that, nothing is true. What could it be? Meanwhile, Buddhism believes in Pratyaksh. I will write B to denote Buddhism. Buddhism also believes in Anuman. Jainism believes in Pratyaksh. Jainism also believes in Anuman. Jainism also believes in Shabda. Although the epistemology of Jainism is slightly more complicated, it is important for your exams, and that is why we will discuss Jain's epistemology in some detail after this, because there is a PYQ that has come from here. So Buddhists, Jains, and Jain also believes in verbal testimony, not of the Vedas, but of the Jinas, the people who have attained Keval Gyan, the people who have attained enlightenment. Then we have Vaisheshikas, which only believe in Pratyaksh and Anuman. Then we have Nyaya, which believes in Pratyaksh, which believes in Anuman, which believes in Upaman, and which believes in Shabda. We have the Sankhya school, which believes in Pratyaksh. Basically, everybody believes in Pratyaksh. So you can consider all of them, all schools believe in Pratyaksh. But Sankhya also believes in Anuman. It also believes in Shabda Praman. Then we have Yog. Yog has the same epistemology, believes in Pratyaksh, believes in Anuman, and believes in Shabda Praman. We have Mimamsa. Mimamsa believes in Pratyaksh, it believes in Anuman, it believes in Upaman, it believes in Shabda, it believes in Arthapatti, and it also believes in Anupalapti. So Mimamsa is a school that believes in all of them. And finally, Vedant or Advaita Vedant believes in Pratyaksh, it believes in Anuman, it believes in Upaman, it believes in Shabda, it believes in Arthapatti, it also believes in Anupalapti. So Mimamsa and Vedant believe in all these things. However, Advaita Vedant also believes in Aparokshanubhuti, a perception that is so clear and that is transcendental. The perception of Brahma. Aparokshanubhuti. Now I told you that Jainism, Jaina has a special kind of Praman Shastra. Jainism has a very interesting take on how do we know things. Can true knowledge ever be attained? Jainism's epistemology. Jainism has two primary concepts. The first is Anekantavad. And the second is Syadvad. Anekantavad basically argues that reality, it's not singular. It's not just one. It's multifaceted. There are several aspects to reality. You must have heard of that elephant story where there were six blind men who were asked to tell what an elephant is like. Somebody touched its tail, somebody touched its trunk, somebody touched its legs, somebody touched its belly, and they all had different descriptions. That is what an ekantvad is. There are several aspects to reality, and there is no one way in which you can articulate the truth. And that is why Syadvad is important. Syad comes from Syat plus Vad. Syat basically means maybe, perhaps, in a way, in some context. So whenever you are saying something, you are humble enough to accept that this might be the truth. This might not be the final truth, but this might be the truth. In some context, it could be true. In some context, it might not be true. So that is Syadvad. And that leads to a different kind of philosophy. The Jainas divide their Pramana Shastra, their epistemology, in two categories. The first is Paroksha. Paroksh Gyan. And the second is Pratyaksh Gyan. Now, Paroksh Gyan is indefinite knowledge. It is the perception that all of us have, which is not complete, which is limited, which is in some certain context, which is limited by our own perceptions. And this also can be of two types. The first is Mati Gyan. Mati basically means your mind, your buddhi, your perceptions, your senses. So any kind of Gyan that you acquire through your senses, through your eyes, through your nose, through your thought, through your reasoning, through your anuman, all of that is Mati Gyan. On the other hand, all that you acquire by listening to a valid source, the Shabd Praman thing, is Shruta Gyan. When you listen to enlightened beings, when you listen to knowledgeable beings, just like you're listening to me right now, that is Shruta Gyan. It's in language, it's in scriptures, it's in teaching of the wise. It's a kind of verbal testimony. And then Pratyaksh Gyan. Pratyaksh Gyan is kind of real knowledge. It has three types which are very important for your exam. The first is Avadhi Gyan. The second is Manha Paryaya Gyan. And finally, it is the Keval Gyan. This is supernatural. This is not like a general human being having knowledge. This is much larger than that. Avadhi Gyan is when you can know about things away from you in space, away from you in time. For example, when I was living in the past, I knew about the Literary Odyssey and what a great website it is and what a great YouTube channel it is and how creative they are. When I was in the past, I knew what amazing courses they provide. The MCQ revision course, the Ultimate Revision course, the MCQ Warrior course, the JRF Warrior course, Paper 1 plus Paper 2, because I knew all of these things. Manha Paryaya Gyan is a degree higher from Avadhi Gyan. In Avadhi Gyan, I know things away from me in space and time. which materially exist. But in Manah Paryay Gyan, I can also know what the other person is thinking. For example, I know my child Bishwajit Deka is trying to poke me. I know there is some masti that is going on in his head. And that is why he's trying to call me Churel. Such a pristine human being, not human being, such a pristine soul I am. And then he's calling me Churel because I know through this Manah Paryay Gyan that he is trying to poke me. And then finally, there is Keval Gyan. This is ultimate, complete knowledge. The word used for enlightenment in Jainism is Kaivalya. Similar words, similar root word. Keval Gyan is only attained to those who are spiritually advanced, who have become the Tirthankars, who have become the Jinas, people who have attained the highest spiritual position in the Jain schools. That is Keval Gyan. Now we move on to, if you have any questions, children, I'm here to answer the questions. I would encourage you to ask more questions, to be curious, because that is a very important part of your life. Let's now start with Nyaya Darshan. We have discussed Jaina, we have discussed the Pramana Shastra of Jainas, and now we come to Nyaya Darshan. Now, Nyaya Darshan is a very interesting philosophy. As I talked about when I was discussing other darshanas, I said how Nyaya Darshan focuses on epistemology and Vaisheshik Darshan focuses on metaphysics. And because Nyaya Darshan focuses on epistemology, because it focuses on how to know, it focuses on pratyaksh, it focuses on anuman, and how to have the correct kind of anuman. And in that, it gives you the 5-membered syllogism. Or the Panch Avyav. Avyav basically means categorization. Panch Avyav Anuman, which you people as short form also call as Phoon or Foon. We will describe this in detail in a bit. But before that, a few more things on Nyaya Darshan. There is a classical Nyaya Darshan which was propounded by Akshapad Gautam. And then there is the Navya Nyaya or the Neo Nyayas, classical school. This was given by somebody called Gangesh Upadhyay. Akshapad Gautam, children, was my friend. Gangesh Upadhyay is a junior. He came in the 11th century. So he is quite recent. But he has done a great work in his book Tattva Chintamani. Tattva Chintamani, where he has explained and expounded on the ideas of philosophy, of Nyaya philosophy, of logic in great detail. There was a famous disagreement between the classical Nyayiks and the Navya Nyayiks about the definition of Pratyaksh Praman. And then Gangesh Upadhyay sort of debunked that and came up with a new definition. We will talk about some of it in a bit. But these were the two people, important people. And the key contribution I've already discussed is the 5-membered syllogism. My God, I just got in the class and got scared. AF. Jyoti, my child, please mind your language and you do not need to invoke God here because God is sitting right in front of you. I am teaching Indian philosophy and I am the best teacher who you can find because I am a sage, I am Maharshi Odyssey. So please sit here, focus. We are going to do some questions as well. You will be enlightened and you will get JRF. There are two benefits of watching this lecture. So stay here. Kunjita says she cannot see anything but Dumbledore. Kunjita, my child, you should not focus on these material things. This material hat, this material beard, this material face, these material clothes. These are inconsequential in the larger picture. Of course, you cannot see the larger picture, and that is the problem. But trust me, believe in the Shabd Praman of my authority, and you will be in the right direction. Now, when we talk about Nyaya Darshan, let's get back to what we were studying. When we talk about Nyaya Darshan, it focuses on epistemology. It argues, its axiology, as I have discussed already, its axiology is that freedom from suffering can be attained through right knowledge. And that is why it focuses on how to arrive and attain right knowledge. I am the goat. I know these Gen Z references. I know what goat means. It means Bakri. I know that. What philosophy? I am here for witchcraft. My teachings will enchant you like witchcraft, Kunjita. So stay here. You are in the right place. Moving on. Let's talk about Nyaya Darshan and how it focuses on how to get the right knowledge. It talks about Prama. Prama basically means right knowledge. So right knowledge is also called Prama. And what is false knowledge called? What is false knowledge called? It is called Aprama. Somebody who is trying to know is called Pramata. Pramata is the knower. What is to be known is called Prameya. Prameya is the object of knowledge. And finally, how you are going to arrive at it is called Pramana, the means through which you attain knowledge. And Praman is again taken from the different Pramanas of Indian philosophy. It believes in the Pratyaksh Praman. It believes in Anuman Praman. It believes in Shabd Praman. It believes in Upaman Praman. Out of these four, two are what we are going to focus on, Pratyaksh and Anuman, because they have been talked about in detail in these philosophies, and also a lot of questions from your exam come from these two pramanas and how Nyaya philosophy conceptualizes these pramanas. So let's start with Pratyaksh Praman. Huda, my child, if you are here, I am now starting to talk about Pratyaksh Praman. Pratyaksh is defined as Indriyartha Sannikarsh Janyam Jnanam Pratyaksham. When the Indriya or the sense organs, they come in contact with the object, and that contact is the sannikarsh. That is when pratyaksh comes about. It is immediate, it is direct, and it is true. It usually, children, supersedes other pramanas. We will study about the badhit Hetvabhasa, when an anuman praman can be contradicted by a superior pramana, for example, pratyaksh praman. We will talk about it. But it is considered a primary pramana, a very credible pramana. There are two types of pratyaksh pramana in Nyaya philosophy. The first is Lokik. And the second is Alokik. Lokik is ordinary, and Alokik is extraordinary. Lokik is the basic, the paroksh praman that Jainas talk about. Is through the five senses. For example, seeing a tree. For example, hearing music. For example, smelling flowers. For example, tasting food. For example, feeling heat through your skin. These are the starting points of cognition. On the other hand, there is Alokik pratyaksh. Pratyaksh that is not coming really from your sense perceptions, or it is slightly different from the kind of Lokik pratyaksh we discussed. The first Alokik pratyaksh is Samanya Lakshan. Samanya is not ordinary here. Samanya is universal. Samanya Lakshan. So I talked about how when you think of Dhananjay, you think of humanity, you think of humans, because Dhananjay is a human. So that Samanya Lakshan of Dhananjay, that universal feature of Dhananjay, is the fact that he is a human. So when you look at a cow, you also perceive the cowness of the cow. Right? So that is Samanya Lakshan. Then there is Gyan Lakshan. Now imagine your favorite dish. When you look at it, why does your mouth start watering? The perception is visual. You're looking at the dish, but it seems so alluring to you that your mouth starts watering. So one sense organ leads to some stimulation in the second sense organ. That is Gyan Lakshan, Pratyaksh. It is a kind of Alokik Pratyaksh. Imagine you were walking in a forest and you encountered a tiger. And suddenly you encounter a tiger and you start getting goosebumps. Now, again, the imagery was visual, but the impact was on your skin. That again is Gyan Lakshan. And finally, there is the Yogaj Pratyaksh. Yogaj Pratyaksh means the supernormal perception of past, of future. And that perception is only available to yogis, to people who are superior beings like me. That is Yogaj. Now there is another way to classify the same Pratyaksha. This was one way to classify Pratyaksh, where we had Lokik and we had Alokik. Alokik had Samanya Lakshan, Gyana Lakshan, and Yogaj. There is another way of classifying Pratyaksh. And that way of classifying Pratyaksh is number one, Nirvikalp. Number 2, Savikalp. And number 3 is Pratyabhikya. Or recognition. Now imagine you are looking at the screen right now, but there must be a lot of objects around you. For example, I can see in my peripheral vision, I am focusing on the screen right now, but in my peripheral vision, there is a pair of shoes. But right now, I can only see a figure of a shoe and black color and some sort of object there. I have not properly perceived it. This is nirvakalp. This is indeterminate perception. When the qualities, the name, the class, the qualities are not there. Now let's say I focus on those shoes. Once I focused on those shoes, I can exactly see what they are like. I can see the color. I can see the shape. I can also see that there are some filthy socks over those shoes. And now it is determinate perception, which is Savikalp. When there is name, when there is class, when there are qualities, all of them are there. And now finally there is Pratyabhikya. Pratyabhikya basically means recognition. Now imagine I have seen, I could only see the pair of shoes through my peripheral vision. I did not have a class, a category to them. And then I saw them and I could exactly point and could see the details and name it and tell the color and tell the qualities of it. But there is a possibility that when I'll turn around, I might forget about them. 3 days later, if you ask me, of course I would remember everything, but a normal human being like you, when you will be asked what were those shoes like if you had perceived them once, you might not be able to tell properly. Or you might not be able to even remember that you have seen those shoes. But now imagine tomorrow also you get to see those shoes. Day after tomorrow also you get to see those shoes. Now that gets registered in your brain. And now that pratyaksh is stronger than ever. And that is when pratyabhikya happens. Try to think of the first time you went to a new school. When you went to the new school, a lot of faces were new to you. Or you went to the first class of your college. A lot of faces were unrecognizable to you. And the second day, you realized, okay, this is this person, this is that is that person, that is that person. But 5 days later, you might forget their name. But regularly for a month, when you encounter these people on an everyday basis, you now start remembering them. And that exactly is pratyabhikya or recognition. I hope this is clear. Now we are done with the pratyaksh praman. We are on to our final thing, which is anuman in Nyaya. It is going to be the last thing, but the most important thing also. So please stay here, and then we will solve some PYQs, and then we will call it a day. Anuman in Nyaya philosophy. Anuman in Nyaya philosophy can be described through these three terms. We are trying to come to something that we call as a sadhya. We already have a paksha, where we have to establish that sadhya. And then we also have a hetu. We will talk what it is about in a bit. But basically, we are coming to something unknown, or we are arriving at something unknown through known things. Let's take the example of the smoke and the hill, and the fire on the hill. Now, smoke is seen on the hill. We know that wherever smoke, there has to be necessarily fire. And that is why there is fire on the hill. So we knew two things. This is something we knew. This is something that we could already see, right? Through pratyaksh, we knew that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Through pratyaksh, we knew that wherever that smoke is seen on the hill. But through these two propositions, through these two statements, we also made an inference, which is there is fire on the hill, even though we cannot see the fire on the hill. Are you able to understand, children? Even though we could not see the fire on the hill, we inferred that there was fire in the hill. Now, if you have studied Western logic, which I think you might have because you always prioritize the West, don't you? Can you identify three terms here? I will not wait for you. Try to do it yourself, but I will tell you that smoke is one, hill is another, and fire is another. You will find these terms in all the three statements. Now, there is a purpose to this reasoning. We only had the mountain. We only had the mountain, and we could see smoke coming out of it. And we had to establish fire on the mountain. So what needs to be established is your sadhya, is what you need to establish. So what needs to be established on the mountain is fire, and that is why fire becomes the sadhya here. On what fire needs to be established? On the hill, fire needs to be established, and that is why hill becomes the paksha here. And finally, hetu. Through what fire is being established in the mountain or in the hill? Through smoke. And that is why smoke becomes the hetu. I am going to give you one more example. And I want you to tell me what are the paksha, what is the paksha, what is the hetu, and what is the sadhya here. The ground is wet. Whenever there is rain, the ground becomes wet. That is why it rained. Tell me what will be the paksh. Tell me what will be the hetu, and tell me what is the sadhya. We will move on for now. Take a screenshot of this and tell me the answer. Osho is alive. Great fan, by the way, not of Osho but of yours. Thank you so much, Somesh Ranjan Mishra. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. A lot of people were comparing me here with Osho. I just said I don't need no comparisons. So there is a paksha, there is a hetu, and there is a sadhya. You could also find parallels of this with Western philosophy. Paksh can be called as the minor term. Hetu can be called as the middle term. And sadhya finally can be called as the major term. But in the Western Aristotelian syllogism, we have only three premises. We have the major premise, we have the minor premise, we have three statements: major premise, minor premise, and the conclusion. But here we have five statements. It's a five membered syllogism, it's a Panchavyav Anuman. Five membered syllogism. This is the statement, Huda. The ground is wet. Whenever there is rain, the ground becomes wet. That is why it rained. Therefore, it rained. We come to the five membered syllogism. Now, if you were in a debate and you had to make this reasoning, or you had to prove something to your opponent, how would you do it? You will have to give a reasoning. But what is the correct way of giving that reasoning? And that is where the Nayayiks came up with this five membered syllogism. This is how you would do it. The first thing that you would do is you would clearly state the proposition. The pratigya. You would show what I am going to prove. Proposition. You would say, dear people present here, today I am going to prove that the hill has fire. Then you would give the hetu for that. You would give the reason for that. Hetu is basically reason. Hetu is also a term, by the way, which again is related to the reason only. So then you would give the reason for that. Or you would introduce the middle term. The hill has fire because there is smoke. This is not the proof. This is just you stating what you are going to do in this whole argument. Because there is smoke. Now you have stated what you are going to prove. You have also stated the reason that you will use to prove it. Now it is time to prove it. And that is when you will give your udaharan or drishtant plus your vyapti. Vyapti is a statement which is also called as universal concomitance. It is basically the invariable, the universal relationship between hetu and the sadhya. I will show you with examples. For example, here is one vyapti. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. We discussed that in this particular syllogism, hill is the paksha, smoke is hetu, and fire is sadhya. So when I say wherever there is smoke, there is fire, smoke is the hetu, and fire is the sadhya. Yes, Udaharan is example. I will come to the example. But before that, I give you the Vyapti. I will give everyone the Vyapti. I have started proving my argument now. So I will say the hill has fire. I'm going to prove that by showing you because there is smoke. And I will say wherever there is smoke, there has to be fire. So that is a universal concomitance, a relationship between the hetu and the sadhya, the hetu smoke and the sadhya fire. Fire is what I have to establish on the hill. Smoke is what I can see, and through smoke I am establishing it. So smoke becomes the hetu and fire becomes the sadhya. And that is the relationship which is vyapti. For example, in a kitchen. Now do not imagine your LPG flames, but imagine a rural kind of kitchen with fuel, with people burning wood to cook food, right? So you have smoke there. So I will give an example of a kitchen where somebody is cooking food and smoke is coming out of that because there is something burning. That is the udaharan, that is the drishtant. I can also give you an example where there is no smoke and that is why there is no fire. For example, a lake, right? So in a lake, there is no smoke and that is why there is no fire. So I can also give you an example where the hetu is not there and that is why the sadhya is also not there. So that also exists. And then finally, I will come back to my statements. I have given the vyapti, I have given the concomitance, and now I will say wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Look at the hill, there is fire. That is your upanaya. Now you are about to conclude your argument, your syllogism. Upanaya is the application, the fact that you can see exactly the same thing happening in the hill. There is smoke in the hill. And finally, you will have now proved it. If everything is going all right, you will have proved it. Nigaman or conclusion. Therefore, hill has fire. Now please note that it is important to understand properly what hetu is, what paksha is, and what sadhya is. If you have to understand these 5-membered syllogism, if you have to understand vyapti, and if you have to understand Hetvabhasa. So I will go back to the example that I gave you. None of you could solve this question, but I will answer it for you. The ground is wet. Please note what we have to establish in this particular scenario. We have to establish that it rained, and we have to establish it from the ground, right? It has rained on the ground. So ground becomes the paksha. What is to be established is rain. So sadhya becomes rain. Sadhya becomes rain. And finally, through what are we proving that rain happened? That is your hetu. We are proving rain happened through wetness, through the fact that it was wet. And that becomes your hetu. So this is your paksha, hetu, sadhya. You should be able to locate, identify what is the paksha, what is hetu, and what is sadhya in all these syllogism that you come across. If you aren't able to do it, it will become difficult. Now let us talk about Vyapti for a bit. Vyapti, we discussed, is invariable concomitance. It is the universal, invariable, without any exception. Or if it is well accounted for. Relation between hetu and sadhya. Please note that through real perception, we can clearly see that hetu is in paksha already. Hetu is in the middle term. Paksha is also called the middle term. Hetu is called the, sorry, not middle term, minor term. Paksha is called the minor term. Hetu is called the middle term, and sadhya is called the major term. Please note that through just perception, we can know that smoke is already there coming out of the mountain. So mountain and smoke are already together. There is already a relationship that is called pakshadharita. So hetu is already in the paksha. We have to establish the connection or relationship between hetu and sadhya. So that is what vyapti is when you try to establish it, right? So wherever there is smoke, there is fire is a vyapti. Now, how can you do it? You can do it by showing that it is there. Positive agreement, you call it anvay. Positive agreement. Please note all of these things. These are important. Positive agreement. You can give the example of a kitchen. So you will have to give an udharan. You will have to give a drishtant that shows your vyapti in real world. So you gave example of the kitchen, for example, where you could see smoke coming out of the fire. So in a kitchen, there is smoke coming out of fire. So it's a positive agreement. It's anvay. The opposite of the word anvay is vyatireki. Negative agreement. So one way to establish vyapti is to show examples where hetu and sadhya are invariably together. And the other way to establish vyapti is to show examples where hetu is not there, and that is why vyapti is also, sadhya is also not there. So example, you show a lake, or you show a place where there is no fire. You show a glass of water. There is no smoke coming out of the glass of water, and then that is why there is no fire, right? So lake is one example. You show the absence of hetu, and that is why no sadhya. The other is anvay vyatireki. Huda says she got a bit confused. That is not a problem, my child. So in Western logic, middle term occurs in the major premise and minor, but in the example above, the vet is hetu, middle term, which occurs in major premise and the conclusion. That is true. Western logic and Indian logic are different. And the kind of syllogism we study in Western logic is deductive. It is deductive. And there is inductive logic also in Western philosophy, Western logic. Inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. On the other hand, Nyaya or any Indian philosophy does not make this distinction of inductive and deductive reasoning. So, that middle term that you see in Western logic, and the minor term and the major term, and how in the conclusion there is no middle term that you see in Western logic, is because it is following a deductive reasoning pattern. It is taking the universal, it is saying all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human, so human becomes the middle term, and that is why Socrates is mortal, and that is why and Socrates is mortal does not have the middle term, because it is following a certain deductive reasoning. That is not the reasoning we are following in the Nyaya philosophy. And that is why you will see Hetu, which is often compared to the middle term in the conclusion, in the Nigaman as well. Right? So we will try to remember the 5-membered syllogism. The first is Pratigya, then there is Hetu, then there is Udaharan with Vyapti, or Drishtanta with Vyapti, then there is Upanay, and then there is Nigaman. Right? Pratigya, Hetu, Udaharan with Vyapti, Upanay, and Nigaman. Please remember these things. So Anvay we figured out, Vyatireki we figured out. When you have both these things, that is called Anvay Vyatireki. And then you come to, there is another way of establishing Hetu, establishing Vyapti, which is Tarka. You consider a hypothetical situation. Hypothetical reasoning, and you test it out. You try to imagine a situation where there is smoke but there is no fire, and you try to find it in the real world. That is a hypothetical scenario, and you realize that you don't find anywhere this thing where there is smoke but there is no fire. You don't find it anywhere, and that is why this Vyapti is true. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. So that hypothetical testing is called Tark. Then there is Upadhi Niras. I am reiterating, these are ways to establish Vyapti. Upadhi Niras is condition testing. So if there are certain conditions testing. If there are certain conditions or certain hidden factor to this Vyapti. For example, here I told you the ground is wet. Whenever there is rain, the ground becomes wet. That is why it rained. Now the Vyapti is, whenever there is rain, the ground becomes wet. Right? Rain is the sadhya. Wetness is Hetu. It actually should be, whenever the ground is wet, it has rained, something like that. Rain is the sadhya, and this is the Hetu. So this is showing a connection between the sadhya and the Hetu. But then you can say that a lot of times it has rained. Sorry, a lot of times I have seen the ground wet, but not because of rain. Because of somebody throwing a bucket of water on the ground. That could also be a reason. And that is an exception. So now you have to account for the exception. And then you can say, when the ground is evenly wet, or it's wet throughout for a very large area, that is when we can consider it true. So you account for all the upadhis, you count for all the exceptions, conditions to this. So you test it for conditions. And finally, you also find certain irregularities. For example, so this is called Vyabhicharagraha. This is again where you try to establish, you test the Vyapti, and you try to see that is if it works in all the situations. Sometimes things may resemble a smoke, but they are not exactly smoke. Vapors, for example. Somebody might be smoking. I remember my friend Gautama was giving me this argument, and I used my powers. I started levitating. I took him to took him to the hill, and I showed him that it was just a large gorilla smoking. Right. So all these things can also be there. And observing irregularity is also the way in which you establish this vyapti. Now we will quickly move on, and we are going to come to Hetvabhasa, and then we will end the lecture. But we have to talk about types of Anuman. Anuman can be of two types. This is very easy. It can be Swartha Anuman. Swarth means for your own self. Or it can be Parartha Anuman. Now, Swartha Anuman is when you are proving that there is fire in the forest for your own self. You see smoke and you realize, okay, there is fire in the mountain. For that, you don't need the 5-membered syllogism. But when you are proving to somebody else, your own self, someone else. When you have to prove to someone else, then you will have to use the 5-membered syllogism. I hope that is clear. That is pretty easy to understand. Now we are coming to Hetvabhasa. To understand Hetvabhasa, we have to also understand what are the characteristics of a valid Hetu. A Hetu has to be valid. When we are talking about Hetu, we are not talking about Hetu, the term, but Hetu as the reason. So basically the term only. True. So what is a valid Hetu? When does a Hetu become valid in a syllogism? So there are 5 characters of a Hetu that are given to us. 5 characteristics of Hetu given to us. The first is Pakshadharmita. Paksha, we already discussed what Paksha is. We will take the same example. So, Paksha, we will take the same example. Paksha was your hill. Hetu was your smoke. And Sadhya was your fire. Now, Paksha Dharmita basically means the Hetu should be present in the Paksha or minor term. Hetu should be present in the minor term. I hope that is clear. Smoke should be present in the hill. If I cannot see smoke in the hill, then there is no Paksha Dharmita. If there is no smoke coming out of the hill and the smoke are not together already. So this has to be a necessary condition for Hetu to be valid. And that is Paksha Dharmita. Then there is Sapaksha Sattva. Sapaksha basically means in similar cases it should also exist. For example, in a kitchen. So this vyapti, this relationship between smoke and fire, it should exist in similar cases as well, other similar cases, right? So fire and mountain and smoke is one relationship. Fire in the mountain, when we see smoke coming out, is one example. You have to show another examples where this hetu is directly related with the sadhya. And then you can say, you can call it, for example, in a kitchen. You can say in a kitchen. So you have to present similar cases. Otherwise, the hetu is faulty. Please notice this, because again there is a PYQ from this that we are going to solve. Then there is vipaksha sattva. Remember we were talking about Anvay and Vratireki? This is very similar. Here also we will have to show cases where there is no hetu, and that is why there is no smoke. So for example, a lake. So similar to Vyatireki. This is similar to Anvay, right? We were discussing Vyatireki positive agreement and Anvay positive agreement, and Vyatireki negative agreement. My screen has been paused for a moment. Let me just fix it very quickly. Now it is working. So Sapaksha Sattva is very similar to Anvay. Not to be confused with Avyav, which is members or categories. So Panchavyav Anuman is the 5-membered syllogism, but Anvay is basically showing positive agreement, and Vyatireki is showing negative agreement, which is same as Vipaksha Sattva. And then we have Abadhitatva. Abadhit Tattva. Thank you, Shivesh, my child. Abadhitattva, which basically means it should not be badhit. The fact that it is not badhit shows that it is a valid praman. What is badhit? Now, badhit is a hetvabhas. Badhit is a hetvabhas when Anuman praman is contradicted by a superior praman or another praman. For example, by pratyaksh praman. I told you how pratyaksh praman is considered very credible. And I also told you how my friend Akshapad Gautam was arguing that there is fire in the mountain because smoke is coming out of it, and I used my powers of levitation and I took him there and I showed him how there was just a monster smoking. So that is why there was no fire in the mountain. So through Pratyaksh Praman, I showed him Pratyaksh Praman. Through his senses, he could see that there was not fire in the mountain, and his Anuman got contradicted. So this Abadhit Tattva, this Badhita should not be there. It should be Abadhit. It should not be contradicted. Not contradicted by another Praman. And finally, there is a Sat Pratipaksha. Again, Sat Pratipaksha is a Hetvabhas, a fallacy. So it should not have the fallacy of Sat Pratipaksha. What is the fallacy of Sat Pratipaksha? Imagine somebody argued to you that sound is eternal. Sound is eternal because it is audible. Sound is eternal because it is audible, like space. Now you can hear space in the sense that you can hear a lot of things in space. Let's say that is the argument. And somebody argues that. But then somebody says sound is not eternal because it is produced. Sound is not eternal because it is produced. Anything that is produced is not eternal. For example, a pot. For example, a pot. This is the udaharan that they gave. Sound is not eternal because it is not produced. It is produced. So the pratigya would be sound is not eternal. Right? Let's go back to the 5-membered syllogism. The hetu would be because it is produced. Sound is not eternal because it is produced. The udaharan dishtant would be whatever is produced is not eternal. Just like a pot. Pot is produced, but then it is not eternal. It dies away. And then there would be upnay, which would be sound is produced. And therefore, sound is not eternal would be your nigaman. So in both the cases, there is an argument being given, an inference that is being given. And that inference is proving the exact opposite. So within the Anuman Praman, there are two contradicting anumanas. And since there are two contradicting anumanas, it is Sat Pratipaksh Hetvabhas. When it is not there, that is Asat Pratipaksh. So for Hetu to be valid, there should not be two contradicting anumanas. And those are the 5 characteristics of valid Hetu. Finally, let us now look at Hetvabhas. Hetvabhas as a word is formed by Hetu plus Abhas. Abhas simply means that you feel like it is there, but it is not actually there. It feels like Hetu is there, but Hetu is not actually there. There is a fallacy that is committed. So Hetvabhas is logical fallacies in these 5-membered syllogisms. What are these 5 types of, what are these different fallacies? 5 types of fallacies. The first is savyabhichar. Hetvabhas. Now, most of these you would already know by now, because when we were discussing the 5 characteristics of valid Hetu, that is when we realized Badhit, we also realized Sat Pratipaksh. So these will be the different Hetvabhasas. But let's first see Savyabhichar Hetvabhas. And this happens when Hetu occurs in instances without the sadhya. When Hetu occurs without the sadhya. For example, I say to you, there are trees on the mountain. Wherever there are trees, there is fire. Wherever there are trees, you want to continue the fallacies and PYQs tomorrow? Okay, let me think about it If that is what you want, children, I think I am also tired. I have also had a very long journey. We can quickly finish the Hetvabhasas tomorrow, and we can uh, do the PYQs also tomorrow. If that is what you want, thank you so much for watching. We will meet again tomorrow and we will finish all of this at the same time tomorrow. I will have to extend my stay to a day, but I think that is fine. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the Literary Odyssey if you liked it. Let me know in the comments what you think of me, what you think of Maharshi Odyssey. And I will come back tomorrow. See you.